Hello, listeners and viewers. Today, let's talk about autism. Why autism? Because autism is a situation that people do not know much about and that is affecting people negatively. And I have decided to actually lead this awareness campaign because I'm personally affected. My son is an autistic boy. But today I'm happy to share with you that because of early intervention mechanisms, we have seen much improvement in his condition today. But then the whole issue here is, the whole issue of autism is shrouded in secrecy. Nobody knows what it is. And sometimes, we react negatively to them. And sometimes we stigmatize children with autism. Sometimes people believe that, in fact, children with autism are cursed from the God. And, I have seen people responding by going to a traditional, medicine men or women to provide some kind of care and solution. That's unfortunate. People are doing that because of sheer ignorance. They don't know about it. And autistic children are stigmatized. So today, I want to start by being open. Some people even they do not even accept that the children are autistic children. And they think that autistic children are some kind of unique children that do not need to be allowed to stay amongst them, and they react negatively. But to your surprise, certain presidents, like one of the United States presidents, one of the previous presidents was an autistic child. We are going to talk about a lot today in this podcast. But first, let's start, first of all, what really is autism? The autism spectrum disorder, as it is being called, is a condition related to brain development that impacts how a person perceives, socialize with others, causing problems in their social interaction and communication. It's a condition. It's related to brain development, and it impacts how they behave, how they interact, how they talk, how they think. And sometimes it causes quite a lot of problems in their social interactions and communication. It's not witchcraft. It's not your sister or your mother or your father or your village people trying to get back at you. It's simply a condition. And so many well-known people, so many celebrities, presidents, authors, writers, TV personalities, comedians, great geniuses of our time like Albert Einstein. These were all autistic patients. For the richest man currently that lives, Elon Musk, of course, by his own admission, that he was an autistic patient. So being an autistic child does not mean everything is lost. It means you are going through a condition that normally that's related to your brain development. When do we start looking out for autism? Of course, it's related to early childhood. It's an early childhood problem. For some people, for a significant minority, sometimes my research actually reveals that some people were diagnosed with autism at the age of 12, and some even above 12. But the majority are being diagnosed during childhood. Some people, sorry, they start exhibiting signs between the ages of 18 to 24 months. But then for the majority is actually early childhood. And it is important for us to understand that there is no known cure yet for autism. There's no known cure for autism. It's a lifelong condition that you have to live with it for the rest of your life. It's a lifelong condition. But then let's look at some of the signs that we need to look out for that identifies a person with an that actually can reveal that a person has an autistic trait. One of such is they normally do not respond to their names. Sometimes when you call them, it appears that they don't hear you. And I have seen somebody hit his son for failing to answer to his name. What if that child is an autistic child? And autistic children do not normally respond to them. And sometimes they pretend not to hear you at all. Before we actually realize that our son, was exhibiting autistic traits, we advise that, he is not talking because he needs to interact with other children. So probably somebody advised us to place him in a preschool, and we identify a school. They charge us very expensive, and we paid. 3 weeks after, the school authorities called us to say, sorry, Mr. Feka, we cannot continue to allow your son in the school because he is deaf and he is dumb. And therefore, we are sorry, but then we have to ask you to take your son out of the school. And I said, well, what about refunds? And they said, no refunds at all. But then when the child gets back to normal condition, then definitely we can take him to the school and then he can just continue. I was so heartbroken at that time, and I don't even want to think about the money for the time being. And they in fact went further to say that the boy is beset with some spiritual problems. And they had the nerve, the audacity, they had the cocaine confidence to tell me I should go to XYZ church or spiritual house so that they can have some kind of they can find some solution. But guess what? My son is not deaf. It's not dumb because he has started talking. So, but then I am looking forward to a day where I am going to confront the school authorities to refund my money and probably to prove to them that they are not just wrong, but they're just liars. But then, that is it. But then, when they told me, my heart was broken, and I found it a little bit difficult to understand because I also started calling his name, and normally he does not respond. But when he is looking at me, I call his name, he will respond. Now I started believing that what the school authorities told me is correct, it's true. But later on, a friend of mine, a mutual friend of the friend of my son's mother, who stays in America, was able to observe and say, look, in my line of work, I work with children of this kind of nature. I think he has some autism or some traits of autism, you must start looking out for early help for him. And I was further, disappointed because I never knew, in fact, what was autism. I was guilty like anyone else that autism is this kind of situation where, people who are, I started thinking in every odd way. But later I decided to take on research, started learning about autism, looking at YouTube videos about autistic children, their behavior, the signs, the traits. I went on Google. I learned a lot about autism. I started looking at people who have been autistic children. And the first thing I started praying. I prayed. But then when I started actually researching, looking at YouTube videos, and I started seeing his behavior, then I came to the realization that yes, my son is now exhibiting autism. But before that, there's so much confusion about what really was his problem. And I later realized that, so many confusion, which I really do want to address right now because this is not the proper medium to address that. But it was so much confusion. So much confusion. But later, I started looking at the signs because I really wanted to understand. And the first sign that I discovered was autistic children fail to respond to their name. Sometimes when you even call their name, they appear not to hear you. And they prefer being alone. Their world is them. They don't want to be in anybody's world. And they do not seem to, they have a poor eye contact or they lack facial expression. They do not speak for some time. And sometimes their speech is delayed. I also realized that autistic children do not start communication. And even if they start one, they don't continue it. They communicate or they talk at their own time, at their own pace. And I also realized that they repeat words verbatim, even when they don't understand what those words mean. They just repeat them. And they do not express emotions or feelings, and they appear to be unaware of the feelings of others. They have difficulty in understanding nonverbal clues such as interpreting other people's expression, their body language, their tone. They have difficulty in understanding that. And they have very unique patterns. They have repetitive movement. Like my son moves a lot. He paced up and down the parlor playing with keys. He loved playing with keys, playing with metal object, keys. Immediately he sees my bag, he goes into it, take my key and start playing with it. And he paces up and down probably the whole night. When he gets tired, he sleeps. And sometimes some of them could actually harm themselves to that. They engage in self-harming activities. Initially, when he gets upset, he actually rubs his forehead on the ground or on hard surfaces. They are easily aggressive and they have specific routines, rituals of behavior, ritualistic behavior. They do the same thing every day. And another sign is that they normally walk on their toes. And sometimes they exhibit stiff, exaggerated body language. Like when sometimes I'm watching him, sometimes I see him making like this towards me. But then I only realize this when actually I started getting interest in his condition. Why is he behaving like this? And a lot of them walk on their toes. And he actually started by walking on his toes. But today, I am happy that I have seen tremendous improvement in his situation, because I have dedicated myself and my life to help him, to teach him. And they are so easily fascinated by objects. If they see like an object turning, I mean, they are so fascinated by that object. And sometimes they're just indifferent to pain and temperature. Another sign that we must look out for as parents: they are so fixated on objects or activities with abnormal intensity and focus. When you give him an iPad, he is going to display 1000% focus on his iPad. Nothing is going to distract him except when he is hungry. And that leads me to the next trait. Sometimes they exhibit specific food preferences. They do not eat anything. They only eat few foods. And they refuse to eat foods with certain texture. With my son, when you want to feed him with anything, he smells it first. He smells it first. And sometimes it was a little bit embarrassing to me, to other people. But later on, when I learned these things, I accepted it, that is his own world. And there's nothing I'm going to do about it except to ensure. But today, there's so much improvement that he eats. For some time, he was only restricted to eating rice and specific sauce. But today, there's so much improvement. He virtually eats almost everything today. So as a mother, what are some of the things you need to know or to see that you must be concerned about? One is when your child do not respond with a smile or happy expression by month 6, then you have to be worried. At month 9 months, if he still cannot mimic sounds or exhibit happy facial expression, then you have to be concerned. If after 12 months of his birth, he still refuses to babble or to say things, dada, mama, 12 months. Of course, normally certain children actually have delayed speech. But the general consensus here is if a child after 12 months still cannot make such babbling sounds, then you must be concerned. And in 16 months, he still cannot even say one word. Then as a problem, you need to be concerned. Today, my son says quite a lot of things. Auntie, calls his mother's name. He now reads A, B, C, D. He sings what his iPad normally, very much interactive with his iPad, And if they refuse to say 2-word phrases by 12 months, then as a mother, you are supposed to be concerned. You need to start seeing the doctor. And if you discover that there is some kind of language defect, skills in their language, their social skills at that particular age, then you must be concerned as a mom. But my research, I was not just interested in trying to discover the symptoms or the signs or the behavioral traits. I also wanted to know, those people who have actually been diagnosed with autism. And I realized that quite a number of people actually have been diagnosed with autism. And one of such non-notable figures is Elon Musk. Of course, we all know Elon Musk today. I mean, he is the founder of Tesla. He's the owner of Twitter. And today he is the richest man in the world. And this is what Elon Musk said. Musk said, "I was bullied quite a lot. I did not have such a happy childhood, to be frank. I have difficulty in understanding social clues and tend to take things literally." And he said, "I found it rewarding to spend all night programming computers." He was so fascinated by computers. So he can spend his whole night playing with computers. Of course, you have Susan Boyle, who is a Scottish singer. He was diagnosed with autism until she was 51 years old. Spent years believing she had what the doctors call brain damage. She said, "But I always knew it was unfair labor. Now I have a clearer understanding of what is wrong, and I feel relieved and a bit more relaxed about myself. When you are with like-minded people in a neurodiverse community who truly understand your struggles, it is easier to take off the mask and be yourself." She was labeled, they labeled her that she was suffering from brain damage. I mean, you have historical figures like Albert Einstein. Of course, Einstein is one of the greatest minds of all times. He is believed to have been autistic. And this is a documented behavioral personality of Einstein. He did not speak until he was age 5. He had hyperfixation and hyperfocus. I mean, those people who are hyperfixated and focused, you do not really want, when they fix their gaze on one thing, they concentrate all their energies. Einstein had difficulty with social interaction, and he has difficulties in processing his, he said he did not like to be touched. He said his brain has been preserved and studied by scientists at his death. A man who was autistic, today his brain, after his death, has been preserved. And today it is being studied by scientists to know exactly what, he was a genius of our time, of his time and of our time. And the contribution of Einstein to the world is still relevant, even though he has departed our world long ago. You have Emily Dixon, a literature professor. There are so many other people. You have quite a lot of comedians like Hannah Gadsby, Kaya Cromer, a lot of them. Musicians like Adam Young, Alexis Weinman, quite a lot of people, a lot of autistic writers and professors and activists. Ada Hoffman, Eric Garcia, Greta Thunberg. This is one of the leading child environmental activists. I think she's Norwegian or so. I stand to be corrected, and she has impacted the world so much. I only learned through my research that she was an autistic child. You have athletes like Alex Reed, the MMA fighter, Chris Morgan, the Olympic roller, Clay Merzo, the professional surfer. All these guys were autistic, were diagnosed with autism. Of course, when you come to historical figures, you have Charles Darwin, the evolutionary biologist. In our days, you will not go through education without talking about Charles Darwin's work. Isaac Newton, the mathematician and physicist. I mean, I was surprised that some of these guys were autistic children, were autistic. Leonardo da Vinci, everybody who is, I mean, my mind was blown when I was doing this research. Ludwig van Beethoven, the composer, Michelangelo. And what blew my mind was Thomas Jefferson, the former US president. So this is to tell you that autism, yes, as a condition, but people, autistic children, autistic persons have the capacity to be important people and contribute. I mean, the richest guy today in the world is autistic. Thomas Jefferson, a United States president, was autistic. I mean, when I looked at the historical figures of our time, Barbara McClintock, Carl Sagan, who is an astronomer, Hans Christian Andersen, an author, Henry Cavendish, a philosopher and a scientist, over 71 known personalities who were autistic, who are diagnosed with autism. Parents who are affected or whose children are behaving abnormally. I am going to repeat this video again, or anytime I am having a podcast, the first thing I'll do, I'll start by looking at the signs and symptoms of autism. It's going to become part of my opening podcast monologue. There is hope for our children. And that is why we have actually, myself and my son's mother, we have actually decided to form an organization called Parents United Against Autism. Parents United Against Autism. And we have dedicated our lives, our resources, our time to work for autism, to be the lead champion for autism, to raise awareness about autism. And we're even thinking of establishing a school where we can be able to train people or to facilitate training, specialist training for those special needs children. Let us stop stigmatizing them. Let us stop misunderstanding them. One thing I have noticed about my son, he knows how to operate my iPhone more than I do. I am not exaggerating. Give him any electronics, he gets into it immediately. I mean, at his age, sometimes the things he does with electronics, I mean, is amazing to me. It's quite amazing to me. You give him a computer, boy, as long as it is a touch computer, it's amazing. He has fantasy for electronics. Maybe that's something I really, really need to pay attention to. But, you know, imagine I never met that friend from America who told me, hey, you need to read a little bit more about autism to be able to understand your son. A lot of people give up on the children because they are seen behaving not usually. I mean, in fact, I have realized that sometimes We normally want our children to be normal. But then the people who have actually, who have been called great inventors of the time, have defied every societal expectation to be normal. And if really you want to be normal, or to be called the normal guy, then do the things that the normal people do. But if you want to be so abnormal and have abnormal success, then you have to be ready to defeat societal expectation and start doing the abnormal things. Some people want to do the normal job. And sometimes, these days I receive a lot of call from people. I do not have a job. Please give me a job. You don't need me to give you a job. You only need yourself to give yourself a job. Because I was listening to Mark Cuban, one of the billionaires in the United States, and he said this. He said, wherever there is problem, there is profit. So what you need to do is to learn to turn problems into profits. I said, wow. If you can find a problem, then you are in profit. But what we normally do, we always want to fit in the normal bracket. He's a normal child. He's a normal husband. He's a normal wife. And sometimes, your partners normally do not even understand you. And sometimes they may even tend to diss you. Oh, he is a normal guy. I know he's an abnormal guy. I want a normal guy. I'm happy to be abnormal. And probably, maybe, it's good for people to be abnormal. And with a list of autistic personalities, Michelangelo, Leonardo da Vinci, Thomas Jefferson, Elon Musk, it goes on and on and on. I think I was listening to a podcast, and somebody said even Lionel Messi was an autistic child. And what I have discovered about autistic children, they are so amazing when they go beyond their autism. And even with their autism, they do amazing things. Maybe we should be blessed for God to send in our lives and in our families people we do not call normal. But autism is real. But because of our sheer ignorance of the problem, we are neglecting our children. Because of the sheer ignorance of the situation, we are stigmatizing them. We think that they are cursed. No, they are not. They are just being special. And probably last night, I just asked myself, why now? Why me? And the answer I got was, everything you have been doing is a preparation for your assignment. And my assignment, my son is only in my life to tell me, hey, guy, you have been an activist for far too long. Maybe you should actually start focusing on regulations that normally deal with special needs of children. You should start being a lead advocate for children with special needs. Because the things that touches us nearer should not be served last, should be served first. That was Julius Caesar's mistake that cost his life. I am a parent affected by a child who is autistic. But then, I'm so grateful for his presence in my life. His presence in my life has changed me completely. It has changed my perception. He has changed. Now these days, I'm almost always home with my son. As long as I'm around him, I care about him. Children are a blessing from God. And I believe that every child has a role to play. I am so happy to be talking to you today about my son's condition. And I am willing to work with anybody for us to come together and fight against autism. In my next podcast, probably coming the weekend or next week, I will be talking about tithing. Tithing is now a hotbed of debate in Christian churches. We have two schools of thought. Some pastors think that tithe preaching pastors are actually exploiting their members economically. In fact, they now call them pastorpreneurs because they now say, oh, tithing is now a business. Church itself, the whole church itself is a business. And that is why tithing is the number one thing. I have been to churches where the pastor spend 1 hour talking about tithing. Tithe. But other schools of thought are now saying it's not biblical, it's not Christian. We should not be talking about tithing at all. That does not mean giving is bad. No, giving is not bad because giving itself is a commandment, is a law. But I discovered in the Bible that there are certain tithes that are meant to be paid yearly. It's going to be interesting. Trust me. It's a deep dive in the Bible itself. I am not saying things that I don't know about. I am saying things that the Bible has said. I'll just be quoting the Bible. And I asked one pastor, I cannot reveal his name. I said, but then, in the Bible, every word talks about fruits, oil, corn, herd, meat, animals. Why now do we pay tithes in money? And he said, well, in those days, money was not in use. And I realized that he was being economical to the truth. Yeah. It's not good to tell your pastor that he's lying. Lying itself is very insulting. Yeah. My lecturer at Frobe College taught me one day, say, hey, you have to be diplomatic in everything you say. They say you can still call him a liar, but just say it in a different form. Say he's been economical to the truth. And I so like that. Because I have discovered that in fact, in Genesis alone, money was mentioned 37 times. 37 times in Genesis. Abraham mentioned money. So how come is this guy telling me that no, we have replaced money with tithing, or does that mean that he is not really much more educated about the concept of tithing? But then this is all for the next podcast. Ladies and gentlemen, my viewers, see you next week. Tithing is the next topic for discussion. And it is going to take me 4 or 5 series because the research is so long. So I have to break it down into bits by bit. So we are going to have maybe probably 4, 5, or 6 series of tithing because we are going to look at tithing in the Bible. We are going to look at all the verses that mention tithes in the Bible. We are going to look at all the verses that mention money in the Bible. How many times money was mentioned in the Bible. It's going to be a good ride with me. See you then until next week. Autism is real, but then intensive care, early detection and intensive care saves the day. See you.